Hey guys, this is Lycoris and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be showing you guys how to customize and make your own DIY Lego clock. Here are the supplies you will need for this project. If you're already a Lego builder, you should have the majority of the supplies. If not, they can be easily found and purchased on Amazon, Lego official website, and IKEA. The total cost of this DIY clock is roughly under $20. The first thing you will need is a base plate. It doesn't have to be a Lego base plate. There's a lot of cheaper alternatives on Amazon. I chose the white one because it matches the IKEA frame that I bought. The second thing you will need is an IKEA frame. In this video, I am using the Ribba 23x23 photo frame in white. IKEA has since retired this product, but there is an alternative that you can use, which is the Ribba 25x25. The only difference between the two is the size. And next up, you will need a drill and a quartz clock movement. You will need to drill a hole in the center of the plate and insert the clock movement there. I got this from Amazon and it was around 10 bucks. And next up, you will need to gather 12 minifigures to put on the clock face to indicate the hours. And in this video, I am using crazy glue to secure the minifigure platforms on the base plate, but feel free to grab any super glue that you can find around the house. Because the base plate is slightly bigger than the frame, you will need to cut off the excess using a pair of scissors, and the nail filer is optional. I'll be using it to smooth out the edges of the base plate. The base plate is slightly bigger than the frame, and in order for us to fit it inside, we need to cut off the excess. So grab this wooden backboard that came with the frame and use it to measure out the base plate. We won't be needing it afterwards, so feel free to recycle this piece. Next, flip the base plate over so the flat surface is facing us. Then place the wooden backboard on top, and in order to prevent it from slipping off when we're measuring, I am using some Scotch tape on all four corners to secure it. Next, I'm using a Crayola marker to mark the edges of the backboard. In a bit, we'll be cutting off the excess, and if there's any leftover residue from the marker, it can be easily wiped off with a wet tissue or an alcohol pad. Next, we will be cutting off the excess part with a scissor. Because the base plate is quite rigid, it's important that when you're cutting it, try not to bend the base plate too much, or you're gonna end up with some stretch marks on the plate. This process requires some patience, and you do need to use quite a bit of strength to cut through the Lego base plates. And to make this part a bit easier, I suggest that after each cut to bend the excess strip of Lego away from you, so this way when you make the second cut, the strip won't be blocking your hand or the scissor. After the cut, you will end up with two strips. Don't throw them out because we will be using them in a bit to make the platforms for the minifigures to stand on. And you can see here on the edges, there are some traces of the blue marker that we used previously. Don't worry, it can be easily wiped off with a wet tissue or an alcohol pad. This next step is optional. After cutting off the excess plates, the edges are going to be quite rough, so you can use a nail filer to smooth out the edges. You can also skip this step if you want. And the plate after cutting should fit nicely into the frame, but you do have to gently push it in a little bit in order for the entire plate to go in. Now we will be measuring and cutting the platforms for our minifigures to stand on using the two leftover strips. In this video, I am cutting the strips into a 2x2 platform. I find this is the perfect size for both putting the minifigures on top and also leaving some space in between the back of the minifigure and the surface of the clock face. Since we'll be using 12 minifigures to represent 12 hours on the clock face, you will need to cut up 12 2x2 platforms. Next, we will be drilling a hole in the middle of the base plate and putting the clock quartz movement in the center. I'm using a marker to mark the dot that I'll be drilling through. It took me almost an hour to figure out how to drill through the base plate. Because we're drilling through one of the dots, I think this part is thicker and more rigid than the rest of the plate. One tip that I have is to first use the tip of your scissor to try to poke a hole through it, and then use the drill to enlarge the hole. This will definitely save you a lot of time. We can now put the shaft of the clock movement through the middle hole, then secure it using the washer and the hex nut that came with the set. And then we can put the hour hand, the minute hand, followed by the second hand onto the clock surface. To ensure we have assembled this part correctly, it's a good idea to put in the battery now to test if all parts are working correctly and moving smoothly. You can see here that when we put the minifigure on, the clock hands are way too long, so we're gonna have to trim off the excess. Because every quartz clock movement comes in different lengths for their clock hands, there is no exact rule as to how much you need to trim off, so you'll just have to play around with it and trim until the clock hands can move freely around without hitting or touching any of your minifigures. By now, our Lego clock is almost done. Next, we're going to glue the 2x2 platforms on the plate. Because we're using super glue as a safety precaution, please be careful when you're using it. It can be very dangerous if you get them on your hands, and also make sure you're using it in a well-ventilated area, and if you want, you can also wear a mask. I have already planned where I'll be placing my minifigures on the plate, so I've marked those spots with a black pen. This way I know where to place my platforms. So you want to place the super glue on the edges of the platform and hold it down firmly for at least 15 to 20 seconds to make sure it stays there. I'm also putting an extra layer of the super glue around the platform after it has been placed there, just to make sure it can withstand the weight of the minifigures. And you want to allow everything to dry overnight before placing your minifigures on top. These are the minifigures that I'll be using for this clock. Because we're not directly gluing these on the clock surface, you can change up the minifigures easily whenever you want. So let's take a closer look at these minifigures that I chose for this DIY Lego clock.